Daryl, guilty conspiracy, guilty firearms.
What?
So I'm gonna let you go,
Jason,
ma'am.
guilty conspiracy, not guilty
Okay.
firearms.
Okay, thanks.
Jason guilty of conspiracy. Huh?
Yes.
He was the mastermind amongst the whole
Okay,
thing.
okay,
It wasn't
thanks.
Bundy after.
Okay, can you?
He was being sarcastic. Funny.
So what was it again, sir?
Didn't mean that.
So it is Dwayne Emer, not guilty conspiracy, guilty depredation of government property. Jake Ryan, not guilty conspiracy, not guilty firearms, guilty depredation of government property. Daryl Thorne, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of firearms in a federal facility. Jason Patrick, guilty of conspiracy, not guilty of firearms in a federal facility.
So
No, Jason Patrick.
That's it.
Jason
No.
Patrick
Conspiracy.
guilty of conspiracy.
Yes.
No.
Come out in the warrant.
There's no.
That's it.
You get your name?
Ryan Hess. I work for OPZ.
Spell it first and last.
RyanHaas.
can you read those one more time for us, please? I'm sorry.
Yes. Hold on. My colleague had just tweeted it. I gotta find it again. Sorry, it'll take me a second.
No, that's just what they said. It wasn't really. It'll come out the way. He was just
I know he wasn't, Dave. I'm asking what the verdict's for you.
So, if you want to, are you guys on Twitter? Okay. If you go to Conrad Wilson on Twitter, he just tweeted a whole verdict sheet, so it's easy to see.
Can you just say the full conspiracy
Sure.
charges?
So, for the conspiracy, it was Jason and Daryl were guilty of conspiracy. Yeah. So Dwayne and Jake were not guilty of conspiracy.
Reed and Jake are not guilty of conspiracy. They came after the fact.
Anything else?
That's good. Thank you, sir.
Formed no agreement.
Yeah, on Twitter, Conrad Wilson.
Formed no agreement.
Yep.
Redo the entire trial, add a whole new set of charges. I mean, I would be shocked if Judge Brown acquits anybody. And so I think it was a difficult situation for these defendants because all the additional time between the fall and now was contribute to the government refining their presentation, limiting evidence and figuring out ways to change the case. And I think the dynamic in the room without Ammon Bundy there changed. And so I think that the result ends up being a different one. But again, not surprising. This is the government's house. They don't lose in this building. And so the fact that they lost the first time made it that much more important and compelling. And that's why, despite a $12 million law enforcement response, they were content if they got nothing more than convictions on misdemeanors. And I don't know, to what extent the firearms convictions, those weren't an issue in the trial that we had last fall. And so I don't know to what extent that ended up being an important factor in how the jury viewed the evidence generally in this case. But, I think at the end of the day, the people that engaged in this protest are people that are committed to a certain sense of justice. And the conviction in this matter is one that they can accept as a consequence of civil disobedience, of a desire to bring attention to issues that are important in their communities that are largely ignored by people in the cities. And so, I just talked to Jason Patrick, and he was convicted, I think, of a conspiracy count. And his reaction to that is one of respect and acceptance. There's frustration, obviously, on one hand. On the other hand, they knew going into this that there was a risk that these things would occur. So, the consequences of those are one that they're willing to bear. And that certainly was Mr. Medenbach's position throughout litigation when we were involved. And And so I respect that about these defendants. So you can't point to a single one of them and say, they did this because they wanted to gain something personally from their participation. It just wasn't about that. And so it's a very unique case in that respect.
Do you think people can see this as justice since sort of Ammon Bundy and the leaders of the occupation were acquitted on these charges and lesser players have now been
Of course not.
convicted on
No, of course not. I mean, it's a failure. It's been a failure all the way along. It was a failure beginning on January 3rd when the federal government failed to take responsibility for enforcing the law and responding to this kind of activity at the first instance. And so, this verdict today is not a vindication of anything. It doesn't change anything about the underlying circumstances. It does nothing to address the underlying issues that led to these individuals being charged in the first place and how all of this came about. And so I think that, hopefully as the hysteria subsides, a real discussion takes place in our country about what's going to happen to communities like Burns in the future. And how it is that when the government controls all this land, people can still work and function in these rural communities. None of that has changed. And nothing about this prosecution does anything more than to support the idea that, if you want to live in a rural community, the only opportunity you have is to work for the government.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Where do I go from here? Well, for me, I just happened to be here today. So I was representing someone from another case, and I ran into one of the FBI agents.
Do you feel comfortable talking on the camera? No? Okay. You want to talk on the camera? No? Not right now? Okay. Okay.
The city guy and the city
Okay. Well, come over here. I'll get Maureen too. Hey, Maureen. Oh, there she goes.
Ma'am, she doesn't want to be bothered.
Okay.
Can we go with
Yeah, go with her. Stick with her.
You too.
What's that? No, not yet. None of them yet. You want to come over here and talk a minute? Yeah. Okay, everybody. We're going to ask Kristen. She was sitting there in the courtroom.
I wear my Lavoie hat.
Okay. Get you a quick little update here of what she's seen in the courtroom. Okay, you're live.
Hi. It's heartbreaking. We were praying so hard. There was a lightheartedness before the verdict. We were all bracing ourselves, praying our Father, and knowing that each one was given an individual verdict. I just didn't feel like this. I mean, I didn't feel like the jury had the right information. They were.
So most people don't know what the verdicts are yet. Some of them are still asking. A lot of people asking yet.
Jason got conspiracy one. One.
Jason was found guilty
for one.
Of one. Okay.
Conspiracy, and then we need to pray for him. And Daryl Thorne got the worst. He got 1 and 2 counts.
Okay.
Conspiracy, and then the other one was the intent to do damage upon and prevent people from working.
Okay.
And then Jake, he didn't get anything but the number 7. And I don't.
Jake Ryan was found not guilty.
Not guilty all the way till.
Jake Ryan's not guilty. Everybody.
But count 7, he was not guilty.
Okay.
Right. And then Dwayne was not found guilty either, except for a different count on depredation.
Okay, count 6 and count 7.
6.
Okay.
And 7. So we have a varied verdict, and thank God at least nobody got the run of the mill kind of verdict.
Yes.
But it was heartbreaking, and we know that the jury had requested the transcript of the actual court case, and they were denied it. We know that there are security cameras all the time up there, and they are recording every word in that jury, and so it wasn't available to the jury to be able to review. The judge said no, and so did the defense. I mean, not the defense. The government said, no, we don't have a recording available for anyone. Well, we sure did have a security camera on, and we also had somebody who was, stenographer was taking it down, and then they were denied that for days. They said, well, we don't know when it'll be available. It'll take days for us to get that. So, in expediency's sake, the jury went ahead and did what they did. They went ahead and gave a verdict without the information that they had requested day one, which was they requested some kind of recording so they could review the facts. That was the request, and they were denied it. And I have a problem with that.
Yes.
We shouldn't be casting a verdict without full knowledge and being able to review. And the judge had said, well, you're requested to then just go over your notes and your memory. Well, we do know that people come in, whether they try to or not, they have bias. And just hearing that, one of the jury members had a problem with us being violent or mean. Do I look violent or mean? I don't know who she was talking about, but that was being said. So I'm just hoping that Daryl, that we pray for Daryl Thorne. He got the worst end of the deal, and also for Jason, he got. It's just, to me, the judge saying, I was there in court, and she called them co-conspirators all the way through the court, and then at the very end said, alleged co-conspirator. I believe that kind of...
Biased.
Yeah, bias was already in the court. So that's my opinion. I saw it with my own eyes, and I heard it with my own eyes, and I even have it word for word. Oh, my favorite part was the end of, I think it was Friday, that the judge had said, okay, the jury stepped out of the room. I'm going to clean this up first, and then I'm going to let you back in. What does that mean? Well, I heard what it meant. It meant she was preventing people from having full testimony. That's what I heard. I heard that she was listening to testimony from the defense and saying, no, you can't be heard. No, this is not acceptable. No, this doesn't fit her agenda. Or
We've got 4 reporters here. I'm wondering who you are.
I'm just a little person. My name's Kristen.
K-R-S-T-I-N?
K-R-I-S-T-E-N.
Yeah.
I have, I was
last name?
actually a scribe in a sense. I just wrote down everything. Thomas.
T-H-O-M-A-S?
Yes.
Where are you from? Thomas.
I am from Oregon, Central Oregon. I prefer not to,
okay.
So how are you connected to this?
Well, I wasn't there, and I learned about it. I'm just one of the people that have been observing, and I didn't even know much about grazing rights until Lavoie was shot and murdered. I come from a commercial fishing background, OFF, from Florida, and when I started hearing the similarities of what my own family went through, I started to investigate, where the Fish and Wildlife used to pull my father over in the boat and harass him, and now it's illegal to be a commercial fisherman in Florida with the net. That was the Ban the Nets agenda, and that's, a different story, but the same story. We're putting our food producers out of business, and where are we going to get our food? The fish that's caught in Florida is not from Florida. If it is caught, a sportsman fisherman catching it, but the commercial fishing industry is over with. It's worth looking up. They turned it into Ban the Nets agenda. And here we are.
Your reaction to this, right?
Well, my reaction is the same reaction I had. My gut it tells me that the jury has been denied a lot of the facts. That's my reaction. Being there and physically in the court and hearing certain things, testimony, seeing the films that the defense had, they weren't allowed to show. Or certain individuals that were physically there were not allowed to be heard. I have a problem with that because it didn't fit the agenda. Am I alone here? I have described, I've written word for word as much as I could what was being said, and I know other people did too. The fact that the jury was denied access to the facts, the recording of the actual court is ridiculous, because we know there's security cameras in there. We know they could have had that. They just wanted to review facts so they could give a just verdict, and I don't believe a just verdict was given. I really don't.
So as you can tell, we're disappointed in the verdict down here today. We definitely wasn't expecting it to come out the way it did. So Jake Ryan's not guilty of conspiracy. If you didn't get all that, so Jake Ryan's not guilty of conspiracy. Dwayne Emmer's not guilty of conspiracy. But Jason Patrick and Daryl Thorne are both. They've been found guilty of conspiracy. Jake Ryan and Dwayne Emmer were both found guilty of count 6 and 7. That's for digging the trench that they both dug. But all other charges they were found not guilty on. The gun charges against Jason Patrick, I do not think, it sounds like he did not get that charge, but just on the conspiracy charge only. And it sounds like Daryl Thorne, they found him guilty on all the charges. So, as we were just hearing there, it sounded like he got the worst deal of all of them. But definitely Daryl Thorne and Jason Patrick need our prayers. They have not come out of the courtroom today. As last time they were out in moments. But right now I'm not for sure exactly what's going on with them up there. But it's definitely a hard moment right now for everybody down here. So that's so everybody is just possibly getting on here. Jason Patrick was found guilty of conspiracy. Daryl Thorne was found guilty of conspiracy in all the charges. Jake Ryan was found not guilty of the conspiracy charges, along with Dwayne Emmer, and only found guilty on the digging the trenches. BJ, I don't know if they took him into custody at the moment. It sounds like they let everybody out of the courtroom except for them at the moment. So all the media that were in there are all down here, but the 4 defendants have not came out of the courtroom at all at this point. So we're not exactly for sure what's happening with them at the moment. The verdicts were split. Jason Patrick and Daryl Thorne were found guilty of the conspiracy charges, and Daryl Thorne, as they were just reporting there, got the worst end of the deal of all of it. He was found guilty on looks like all charges. And but Jake Ryan and Dwayne Emmer were found not guilty on the conspiracy part of the charges. So just on count 6 and 7 is what Jake Ryan and Dwayne Emmer were charged with. Those were the digging of the trenches. So that's what we have the report to you right now. I'll probably go live a couple of more times a day, especially if they come out of the courtroom. So far, the defendants, I have not seen any of them come out. So hopefully we'll have you some more updates here shortly. So that's all I have right now for you. Keep praying for us down here. Keep praying for the Nevada people. God bless, and we'll try to keep you updated just shortly again. Thank you.
Conspiracy, not guilty firearms, guilty depredation of government property. Daryl Thorne, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of firearms in a federal facility. Jason Patrick, guilty of conspiracy, not guilty of firearms in a federal facility. So that's it.
Jason Patrick
Conspiracy.
guilty of conspiracy.
Yes.
Come out in the war.
That's it.
You get your name?
Ryan has it. I work for OPZ.
Spell it first and last.
Ryan on Twitter. He just tweeted a whole verdict sheet, so it's easy to see.
Can you just say the 4 conspiracy
Sure.
charges?
So for the conspiracy, it was Jason and Daryl were guilty of conspiracy. Yeah. So Dwayne and Jake were not guilty of conspiracy.
Reed and Jake are not guilty of conspiracy. It came after the fact.
Anything else?
That's good. Thank you, sir.
Where can that be seen?
Or no agreement.
Yeah, on Twitter, Conrad Wilson.
Formed no agreement.
Yep.
It's not here later.
Redo the entire trial, add a whole new set of charges. I mean, I would be shocked if Judge Brown acquits anybody. And so I think it was a difficult situation for these defendants because
Carol, guilty conspiracy, guilty firearms.
What? So I'm gonna let you go,
Jason,
man.
guilty conspiracy, not guilty
Okay.
firearms.
Okay, thanks.
Jason guilty of conspiracy. Huh?
Yes.
He was the mastermind amongst the whole
Okay,
thing.
okay,
It wasn't
thanks.
Bundy after.
Okay, can you?
He was being sarcastic. Funny.
So what was it again, sir?
I didn't mean that.
So it is Dwayne Emer, not guilty conspiracy, guilty depredation of government property. Jake Ryan, not guilty ANHAAS.
Can you read those one more time for us, please? I'm sorry.
Yes. Hold on. My colleague had just tweeted it. I gotta find it again. Sorry, it'll take me a second.
No, that's just what they said. It wasn't really. And it'll come out the way. It was just
I know he wasn't, Dave. I'm asking what the verdict's for.
So if you want to, are you guys on Twitter? Okay. If you go to Conrad Wilson.